Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Patryk Witkowski and I'll be reading the news bulletin for you this evening. For our Ukraine update, we have day 911 of a conflict where Western suppliers should let Ukraine fire their powerful long-range weapons at targets in Russia, Josep Borrell has said on Wednesday. Borrell, who as the EU's foreign policy chief counts as its top diplomat, argued for lifting restrictions on the use of capabilities versus the Russian military involved in aggression against Ukraine in accordance with international law. End quote. To read that quote again, he said, he argued for the lifting of restrictions on the use of capabilities versus the Russian military involved in aggression against Ukraine in accordance with international law. Borrell said the matter would be on the agenda for discussions during the back-to-back meetings of EU foreign and defense ministers taking place on 29th and the 30th of August in Brussels. Ukrainian drones appear to have hit the Russian airfield of Marinovka in Volgograd Oblast. In the early hours this morning, explosions were heard in the adjacent town of Kalach na Donu. Ukraine said on Wednesday that to defend the front line of its Kursk invasion, it had destroyed Russian pontoon bridges with US-made HIMARS rockets. Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov told a visiting delegation of US congressmen on Wednesday that the attack on Kursk aimed to clear the border from Russian military threats and make enemy shelling and attacks on our town and villages impossible. Ukraine's foreign ministry said Kiev's advance into the Kursk region has made bigger territorial gains than those made by Moscow in Ukraine this year. Ukraine's military said its forces came under repeated attack on Wednesday around Pokrovsk, but were inflicting losses on the attackers, claiming 238 Russian troops were killed or wounded in the same area. Volodymyr Zelensky said his forces understood that Russia was attempting on the Pokrovsk front, and Kiev was strengthening its forces accordingly. Ukraine's president urged allies to keep to the agreed timetable for supplying munitions to the Ukrainian military. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said on Wednesday Ukraine has prepared its military operation in the Kursk region very secretly and without feedback, which is certainly due to the situation. This is a very limited operation in terms of space and probably also in terms of time. Scholz said Germany would continue to be what he said was Ukraine's biggest supporter in Europe, a remark that comes amid a struggle within Scholz's freeway German coalition government to reach a deal on its federal budget. Germany plans to have its Ukraine aid next year, betting the shortfall will be made up by a G7 plan to loan Ukraine $50 billion backed by proceeds from Russian assets frozen in the West. Moving on to our Israel and Gaza latest, where more than 40,265 Palestinians have been killed and 63,144 have been injured in Gaza since October 7th, the Gaza Health Ministry said in a statement today. President Biden called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and made clear that we must bring the ceasefire and hostage release deal to closure. In the northern Gaza town of Beit Lahia, a strike on a house killed 11 people, while another killed 6, including a local journalist. In a house in Al-Maghazi camp in the central Gaza Strip, medics have said. 5 others were killed in the separate strikes in the south. In the central Gaza town of Deir al-Balah, which houses around 1 million residents and displaced Palestinians, according to the municipal council. Residents said tanks advanced further from the east and blocked some roads connecting the city with a nearby Khan Yunis in the south. Rights Group today expressed renewed concerns about the humanitarian situation in Gaza after Israel's latest evacuation order in parts of the overcrowded central city of Deir al-Balah. The Israeli police and internal security service today say that they arrested 4 suspects for terrorist acts against Palestinians during a deadly settler attack last week on an occupied West Bank village. A Greek-flagged oil tanker carrying around 150,000 tons of crude oil that was evacuated by its crew after being attacked in the Red Sea now poses an environmental hazard. The EU's Red Sea Naval Mission, Aspides, said on Thursday. Hezbollah has provided a glimpse of its secret tunnels housing weapons, a move experts say is a warning to Israel as the underground facilities could prove vital to the group should wider war erupt. Shifting our focus to the UK, where the UK government ministers rule out joining EU youth mobility scheme. UK government ministers have reiterated their opposition to any deal with the EU which would allow young people to live and work in EU countries. Media reports yesterday, citing unnamed UK government sources, as saying UK ministers accepted they would have to give ground over parts of a proposed mutual youth mobility system if they were to get agreement in other areas, such as a reduction in checks on UK food entering the EU. However, a government spokesperson denied that this was being considered. "We are not considering it. There are no plans for this, or any work being done on it," they said. Asked whether the issue might come up in future talks with the EU, they said, "Our negotiating team has very clear red lines, and none of the preparatory work involves this." Labour has been adamant it will never oversee a return to the free movement of people. However, it was hoped it might consider the idea of a youth mobility scheme, which would allow EU citizens under 30 to work and study for a fixed period in the UK and vice versa. In April, the EU made a formal offer to negotiate a bloc-wide youth mobility program, but this was immediately rejected by both Labour and Rishi Sunak, who was the Conservative Prime Minister at the time. Only the SNP currently supports Scotland rejoining the EU and free movement of people. For our next story, unions are to press the UK government for pay restoration deals for public sector. Unions are to push the UK government for pay restoration deals that would award above-inflation pay rises to public sector workers who have suffered a decade of real-term salary cuts. Members gathered for the Trades Union Congress's annual meeting next month are due to vote on a motion that calls for pay restoration to be a key feature of our campaigning with the new government. The final agenda for the event shows: the current holder of the TUC's revolving presidency, the Fire Brigades Union boss, Matt Rack, told the Financial Times, which first reported details of the campaign, that he expected delegates to back the demand. The PCS union, which is championing the motion, said it aimed to make up for the fact that pay levels had actually fallen on average of 1.5% a year since 2011. The government has so far offered a 22% pay deal over 2 years to junior doctors, who have been calling for a 35% rise to counter a fall in real wages over the past 15 years. The British Medical Association is holding a member ballot on the deal until mid-September. Separately, nearly half of GP surgeries in England started taking part in industrial action this month for the first time in 60 years. With 1 in 4 doctors capping the number of patients seen at 25 a day. The industrial action is being launched in protest of the last government's decision to increase their budget by only 1.9%. The details of how any UK government public sector pay deals will have a knock-on effect on expectations in Scotland. However, until details of how any pay deals are funded, the Scottish Government is facing uncertainty over how much its block grant funding will be increased. The UK Government are planning public sector cuts in the autumn budget, which could result in any pay deals being financed from existing budget settlements. Our next story is the Edinburgh Council agreeing a draft visitor levy scheme. Edinburgh's plans for a visitor levy took a significant step forward today as councillors agreed key details of a draft scheme. The proposals anticipate the levy will generate tens of millions of pounds a year to reinvest in the city's infrastructure and sustainable tourism from summer 2026. A formal 12-week public consultation seeking further input from residents, visitors, and businesses is set to commence in the coming weeks. This will inform the final scheme, which will be agreed in January 2025 ahead of an 18-month implementation period. Edinburgh will become the first place in the UK to launch such a citywide levy, which will drastically help the council manage the demands of increased tourism while ensuring sustainable investment in the visitor economy. Public services, city maintenance, affordable housing, and preserving the capital's cultural heritage. Key highlights of a draft visitor levy scheme include a flat 5% charge per night. Visitors staying in accommodation will be required to pay a small, fixed fee per night of 5% of the accommodation cost, capped at 7 consecutive nights. Wide range of accommodation. The levy will apply to paid accommodation, including hotels, short-term lets, hostels, and bed and breakfasts, which will exclude stays in campsites. Funding allocation. The levy is expected to raise £45 to £50 million a year by 2028 and 2029. Revenue generated will be reinvested directly into initiatives that benefit residents and enhance visitor experiences, such as a well-kept city fund, affordable housing, city infrastructure, destination marketing, and support for major events and festivals. Shaped with industry input. The draft scheme has been shaped by many years of engagement with local businesses, residents, and tourism stakeholders, including hoteliers. Expected to launch in 2026 when the draft scheme is finalized, early in the new year. The council will begin working with partners to implement the visitor levy and make it live by summer 2026. The COP16 president calls for restoration of nature to avoid global catastrophe. Colombian Environment Minister Susana Mohammed, who will be president of the UN Biodiversity COP16 summit in Cali in October, has said that a singular focus on cutting carbon emissions while failing to restore and protect natural ecosystems would be dangerous for humanity. Risk societal collapse. She warned that humanity risks catastrophic global heating if it focuses only on decarbonization at the expense of restoring the natural world in her lead-up to the world's key nature summit later this year. While laying out her vision for the meeting during a press briefing in Montreal, Canada, Mohammed said a main focus would be to raise political awareness for the natural world to keep humanity in safe planetary limits. There's a double movement, beginning of a quote here, there's a double movement humanity must make. The first one is to decarbonize and have a just energy transition, Mohammed said. The other side of a coin is to restore nature and allow nature to take again its power over planet Earth so that we can really stabilize the climate. The climate has much more awareness and political investment, but we are not seeing the other side of a coin, and it's dangerous. This is dangerous for humanity. One of the main purposes for COP16 in Cali is to make biodiversity and the global biodiversity framework as politically relevant as the climate agenda, she added. While the nature crisis has risen up the global political agenda with a 2022 UN agreement to halt the loss of biodiversity by the end of its decade, the nature summits, which take place every 2 years, do not enjoy the same attention from governments and world leaders as meetings about the climate, which are attended by tens of thousands of delegates every year. Ahead of talks, Mohammed urged governments from the global north to make good on their commitments to increase funding for nature restoration, adding that COP16 would focus on how to mobilize alternative sources of finance from the private sector. In America, Tim Walz accepts VP nomination as Kamala Harris prepares for her DNC speech tonight. Kamala Harris will tonight face the biggest test of her political life so far when she addresses the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in a bid to persuade American voters to defeat Donald Trump in November's presidential election and put her in the White House. Vice President's rocket-fueled campaign is still barely a month old following Joe Biden's decision to withdraw from seeking re-election in the face of a disastrous debate performance and questions over his age and mental acuity. Mental performance. Harris and her vice presidential pick, the Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, have quickly overturned the election's narrative, turning a solid Trump lead in the polls over Biden into a slight but clear advantage over the former Republican president. In addressing the Democratic convention tonight, and by proxy the wider U.S. electorate, watching in their millions on television, Harris will be making a direct pitch to voters to back her vision for the United States. Last night, the Minnesota governor, Tim Walz, accepted the Democratic Party's vice presidential nomination by emphasizing his rural bona fides. Well, that he's a bona fide rural expert, or that he understands the rural lifestyle and Americana background as a teacher and coach in a more sweeping speech than the unassuming Midwesterner has given before. Quote, "You might not know it, but I haven't given a lot of big speeches like this," Walz said as he closed out Wednesday's Democratic convention in Chicago. "But I have given a lot of pep talks." The former football coach laid out the metaphor as the crowd again chanted, "It's the fourth quarter. We're down a field goal and we're on the fence and we've got the ball. We're driving down the field and boy, do we have the right team. Kamala Harris is tough. Kamala Harris is experienced and Kamala Harris is ready." End quote. The pep talk capped off a well-received speech full of Waltzian refrains, and he knows what small-town neighborliness is, and his time in the classroom taught him about public service. He described growing up in a small town and the tolerance that was required for respecting your neighbors. "We've got a golden rule," he said, as the crowd began to finish one of the common lines of a campaign trail: "Mind your own damn business." Walz also focused on his background in the military service, which Republicans have attacked in recent days, and as a public school teacher in Mankato, Minnesota, where he taught social studies and coached the high school football team. "Never underestimate a public school teacher," he said. Like many other speakers on Wednesday night, he built on the day's theme of freedom and pointed to the conservative manifesto backed by Trump allies, Project 2025. Project 2025 will make things much, much harder for people who are just trying to live their lives. They spent a lot of time pretending they know nothing about this. But look, I coached high school football long enough to know and trust me on this. When somebody takes the time to draw up a playbook, they're going to use it," he said. Sticking with the American theme, we've got news that the Trump campaign deletes a Freedom video after Beyoncé blocks use of song. Beyoncé has blocked Donald Trump from using her song Freedom after the track, the central song for the Kamala Harris campaign, was used for a Trump campaign video on social media. Trump spokesman Stephen Chung posted the video showing Trump walking off a plane backed by freedom. Rolling Stone and Billboard reported that Beyoncé's record label and publisher moved to block the use, and Chung's video has now been deleted from social media. Beyoncé has not commented on the incident. She is rumored to be performing at the Democratic National Convention DNC today, but representatives for the singer and the Harris campaign have not commented. The Harris Waltz team has made freedom a core part of its campaign, unveiling a new a cappella version in the campaign ad of the DNC, which also features a speech from Oscar-nominated actor Jeffrey Wright. Harris has also used the song at other campaigning events, and her supporters have been pictured wearing cowboy hats and cowboy Kamala sashes, referencing Beyoncé's 2024 album Cowboy Carter. Shifting back to Scotland, where the Scottish government is funding to improve rural 4G connection. The Scottish Government programme to install 55 4G mobile phone masts in rural and island communities has improved home life, work life, and business performance, according to a new analysis. Around 2,200 homes and businesses now have a faster mobile internet connection through the £28.75 million Scottish 4G infill S4GI project, the first and biggest project of its kind to have been completed to date in the UK. Residents and business owners highlighted a range of benefits since the program's completion, including wider online customer bases for businesses and better connectivity for communities during broadband outages. Surveys and focus groups also flagged flexible working patterns, improved employee productivity, and easier access to online learning materials and jobs. Access to 4G connection was given as a factor for people remaining in or moving to the areas. S4GI targeted long-standing mobile phone signal black spots across the country, from Bruree in Shetland to Cairngorrick in Dumfries and Galloway. Construction of the masts was carried out by WHP Telecoms and Cellnex UK. The program was project managed by Scottish Futures Trust. Employment and Investment Minister Tom Arthur visited Neath Valley Alpaca Farm in Dumfries and Galloway to hear how 4G connection has benefited the business. He said, "Although telecom's responsibility is reserved to the UK government, the Scottish government has long recognised the vital importance of good digital connectivity, both for work, for business, and for day-to-day life. S4GI is an excellent example of strategic investment and delivering multiple benefits. This is about creating opportunities for business, improving daily life, and ensuring no one, even the hardest to reach, is left behind in the digital era. The availability of 4G services has proven to be transformational for residents and businesses in those 55 areas included as part of a program. And we are sharing the lessons learned through months of complex build and collaboration with the UK government so that they may benefit the ongoing rollout of a shared rural network program." End quote. Our next story is the Scottish Government funding project to help parents in Uist back into work. A project providing training opportunities and childcare provisions for parents led by Comhairle Nan Eileen CR has received £60,000 from the Scottish Government. Funding for the local authority and 5 others across Scotland is part of the Scottish Government's Addressing Depopulation Action Plan, which sets out steps being taken to strengthen communities facing depopulation. Other local authorities in receipt of this funding are to be announced in due course. Equalities Minister Cowcab Stewart said, Uist has a lot to offer young families, but more needs to be done to ensure people can make their livelihoods on the islands. Working in partnership with local businesses and organizations, this project will help parents to secure work and stay in the area, supporting the islands to sustain the population they need to thrive into the future. It will support parents to access vital training and childcare, helping them back into work, ensuring that skill gaps on the islands are filled and putting more money in their pockets. Eradicating child poverty is the defining mission of this government, and we know well-paid work can be an effective route out of poverty. This support will be targeted to those who are more likely to experience barriers to finding work, helping lift families out of poverty while also boosting the local economy. Next story is the Scottish Government announcing consultation on charge for single-use cups. People across Scotland are being asked to have their say on a minimum charge for single-use cups to promote responsible consumption and cut waste. The Scottish Government is consulting on the possible introduction of a 25p charge to all single-use drink cups when a drink is bought, regardless of material. Exemptions would apply for specific locations and uses, such as in schools. Free drinks in hospital or care settings would not be included in the scope of a charge. There are already similar charging schemes for cups established in Europe, with the Netherlands introducing a guideline charge of 25 cents on plastic single-use cups in 2023. Legislation allowing the introduction of environmental levies on single-use disposable cups in the Republic of Ireland was passed in 2022, although it has yet to come into force. Under the consultation proposals, retailers would be able to retain reasonable implementation costs from the charge, mirroring the approach taken for single-use carrier bags. It also seeks views whether the net proceeds from a charge should be kept by businesses and used for good causes or collected by local or national government. An estimated 388 million single-use cups were used in Scotland in 2021 to 2022, creating 5,400 tons of waste. The use of single-use plastic carrier bags fell by 80% in the first year in Scotland, following the introduction of a 5p charge in 2014. The charge is widely believed to be a success, with the Marine Conservation Society annual litter survey reporting an 80% drop in plastic bags found on UK beaches since its implementation. Acting Net Zero Secretary Gillian Martin said, "The success of a single-use carrier bag charge shows how an environmental charge can be an effective tool to change people's behavior and encourage responsible consumption." While many businesses already have offers in place to encourage the use of reusable drinks cups, hundreds of millions of single-use cups are still being discarded, creating 5,400 tons of waste every year. Many of these cups end up littering our roadsides, town centers, beaches, and parks. Introducing a national charge could provide consistency for consumers, provide a level playing field for retail and businesses, and help to drive forward sustainable behaviors. Our proposed approach is similar to the charge for single-use carrier bags and will be familiar to both suppliers and the public. We hope this means that it will minimize any administrative burden on businesses and make it easy for individuals and organizations to adopt. I urge everyone to have their say, so we choose the most sustainable option for both people and businesses while helping us tackle litter, reduce waste, and cut emissions. And with that story, we will be wrapping up for the evening. Before I go, let me remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we do depend on the generosity of all our supporters. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford the £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. To everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make regular monthly payments, thank you very much. Right now, we must urgently increase our donation if we are to be able to pay our bills. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but our income is just over £2,000, and we are now facing mounting debts. please donate whatever you can afford. Thank you, and thank you. I've been Patryk Witkowski. Thank you for sticking with me for the news bulletin. I hope you enjoyed, and goodbye. Thank you for watching.